pillars of credit. We looked at payment history, 35%, right, of what makes up your credit score. And then now your credit utilization is 30%. And both of these things are negative for you, which means your credit score is going to go down. Currently, the average credit score is around 706. I think the last data. It was higher. I think it was like 715, 718. I think I even mentioned it on the show as well. Some newer data has come out. So it's back down around 706 or so. So since that's the case, it's going to lower some credit scores, and it's probably going to impact it because Wells Fargo has a lot of customers with this, even though in their quote unquote portfolio, they did not disclose how many people have this personal line of credit and how many people it's going to impact. It's not disclosed in there. So it is going to absolutely negatively impact your credit utilization. What else is going to do to you if you close an account? So like I said, it doesn't have to be this Wells Fargo thing. It can be anybody's bank. If you have a credit card, you haven't used it in a long time, they may close it due to inactivity. So you need to check on your credit cards. And this is very important for like the cards that you don't use often. So not necessarily the Visas and the MasterCards, but those cards you have at stores or third vendors. Like if you have a card at a place that, you buy your tires from, or you have a card at a place where you get your vehicle repaired, or, you get your oil changed, things of that nature. Those places that you may not use that often, then those people actually close your credit cards as well. So you need to check on them. You might need to call them and see, hey, what's up? Things of that nature to make sure it's not closed. So if you close your credit cards, you close those kinds of things, then it negatively impacts your credit score, just exactly like this Wells Fargo thing is going to do for people. So what else does it impact? Your length of history. So your average length of history is going to be shortened. So if you close a credit card, now you don't have the benefit of that card being opened anymore. You don't have the benefit of this Wells Fargo personal line of credit being open anymore. So that is going to negatively impact your length of history. So if you had a good long length of history, and your length of history is the average length of history, not because you got your first credit card at 18 and now you're 60. So you're like, oh, I got all this, this long length of history. You could have got one at 18, closed it when you were 20, didn't pick up another card or do anything until you were 30. And so now you're 60 years old. That doesn't mean you got a 30-year credit history either. So it's an average of all of the accounts that you've had, the oldest, the youngest, and everything in between. So it is going to negatively impact your length of history as well. Length of history is 15% of what happens with your credit score. So when you close those cards, and you got Wells Fargo in here closing your card, involuntarily closing this personal line of credit, not card, this personal line of credit, then it's going to make your length of history shrink. And we're going to talk, when we talk solutions, on what could you do, what can you do to combat this, or get rid of Wells Fargo, if you will, and move that debt somewhere else. Length of history is going to be impacted there as well. So stay tuned for that particular part as well. Length of history absolutely is going to be impacted there. So then, like I said, that's 15% of what makes up your credit score. All of these things are negative for you. Now, what does that mean in terms of points? How does that impact me in terms of points? Well, that's difficult to say. It depends. And that's like the first thing that you can give somebody an answer to, give an answer to someone when they're asking you a question. Well, it depends. Well, it does. It absolutely depends. Depends on where you are. If you're sitting at a 585 versus a 785, it depends on how many points you're going to lose if this happens to you. Could be as little as 30 if you're on the lower end. So if you're at a 585, you're on the lower end, could be 30, could be 60 points. If you're at the higher end, and you're at the 785 end, you're going to lose more points. Unfortunately, you're going to lose more points than the person that has a lower credit score. Unfortunately, that's the way it works. So I guess the way that saying goes, too much is given, much is required. Then when you have a higher credit score, if something negative happens on you, you get more points taken away from you than a person that has a lower credit score and something happens negative. It could be the exact same thing. You got an 800 credit score, they got a 500 credit score, you both miss a payment on the same type of credit card or same type of account, and the person with the 800 credit score will lose 70 points. The person with the 500 credit score, they'll lose 25 points. It's the way the system works. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying it's accurate. I'm just letting you know that's the way the system works. So it absolutely is going to negatively impact your score. Now, let's get to the types of credit that you have. So your credit mix, right? So let's say you got two cards. You got two credit cards. You've got this line of credit, from Wells Fargo, since we're talking about them. You got this line of credit, and say you got three loans. You got a mortgage, you got a car loan, and you got a student loan. So that is a really good mix. You've got a mix of all types of accounts that you can get. You got a personal line of credit, you got revolving credit, which is your credit cards, and you've got these installment loans as well. And it's not just one in each category. So that's a pretty good mix. You get points for having a good mix. The credit bureaus want to see if you know how to handle different types of credit. So since you can handle these different types of credit, you're getting more points. Your credit score is higher. So let's say they take away this one now. So now they're going to take away your line of credit. You still have a decent mix, right? You still have a decent mix. But typically, even with myself, and proud to say still, it's been 1 year, August, and it hasn't updated for August yet, but it's been 1 year, August of 2020. I got the notification that I had an 850 credit score. So, your credit scores run from 300 to 850 being the highest, right? So I got an 850 credit score, and I've maintained my 850 for an entire year. I've maintained this 850. Now that's going to change because some things about to happen, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a couple of months. I'm about to pay off a loan, my car loan specifically. I'm about to pay that off in a couple of months or so, and we'll see how that negatively impacts my score. It'll probably show up around October, November, when my score will be impacted. But we'll talk about that, and I'll tell you guys exactly what happens. So I'm about to make that kind of move, and we'll see what happens, right? So back to your mix. So that's a pretty good mix. You got a couple credit cards. You got three loans. So that's a pretty good mix. But like I was saying, even with myself, and when I look at how they're evaluating, always pops up that you don't have the greatest credit mix. Even though I got an 850, it always says you don't have the greatest credit mix. I mean, I've got like 4 credit cards or so. I got a few loans out there, mortgage, car, I got some stuff, right? But it still says I don't have the greatest mix. So I don't know what the perfect mix is. Is it 5 credit cards and 4 installment loans? Is it 4 and 4? Is it 5 and 5? Is it 6 and 4? I have no idea what it is, what the credit mix is that would be absolutely perfect, and when they won't have anything to say. But if you're gonna lose this personal line of credit, and say you only had the 2 credit cards like we spoke of, and they were counting this as the third one, then they may consider your mix not as good as it was before. And again, that's going to lower your credit report. So there's absolutely nothing positive about closing your credit cards. There's nothing positive about closing this personal line of credit, whether you do it or the actual entity closes that account. There's nothing positive about it for you at all. So we've gone through most of the pillars of credit. There's 5 pillars of credit, right? And if you're not sure what those 5 pillars are, go back, listen to the show, or better yet, get my book, 5 Pillars of Credit by myself, Kevin King, the 800 Credit Score Man, available on Amazon, exclusively on Amazon right now. So you go check that out. And it's only $2.99. So go get 5 Pillars of Credit from Amazon, an ebook. You can read it this afternoon. All right. So we talked about this now. We talked about your credit mix now. Now, what if you owe on this particular line of credit that Wells Fargo is going to snatch from you, and now it's closed, but you still owe that money? So since you're owe that money, it's absolutely going to hurt your utilization, specifically and until you get to pay it off. So they may have closed the account, Doesn't mean you don't owe it. You don't owe that money. You still owe that money. The account is just closed, but you still got to make those regular payments on it, and you're not getting the quote unquote credit applied to your credit report that you would before. So you've got to absolutely make sure that you continue to make the payments on this, because it may not show up on your credit report on a monthly basis, or it could, even though it's a closed account. Guarantee if you don't make those payments, it's going to show up on your credit report somewhere, someday, whether it's in collections or whether they keep it going on a monthly basis, it's going to show up on your credit report. So still make those payments. But what happens to you when you have a closed account, but you still owe on it? Especially when it comes to something that is revolving like this. This is not an installment loan. It's a revolving account like a credit card. So let's just talk about credit cards in general. So if you've got a credit card and you've got a $10,000 limit on your credit card, and then you close the card or the place closes the card, and you still owe them $5,000. So you owe $5,000. You have a $10,000 limit. That's a 50% credit utilization. So now if you close that card, or that card gets closed some way, somehow, you still owe $5,000. Now you're in the negative. Like you owe, more than 100% of it. So your credit utilization goes through the roof. So this is going to hurt people. This is absolutely going to hurt people that have high lines of credit with Wells Fargo, and then they could have been managing their credit cards perfectly. They could be at a 2% utilization. They barely use it. They buy groceries. They pay it off every month, whatever it is. And they've been doing this, making sure that their credit utilization was really low, which helps their credit scores. But now, because they're going to take away the availability of whatever their personal line of credit is, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, or just 3,000, they're going to take that away from them, and it's going to be calculated in their credit utilization, and it's going to be a negative. So for some people, it can make it shoot up really high, really, really high. You can be at 100% or over 100% because you owe money on it, right? It could be that way, or it could not impact you that much if you had a smaller amount. Maybe it doesn't impact you that much, or if you had a bunch of other credit cards and a lot of space in there when it comes to your credit limits versus what your credit balances are. So it's absolutely going to negatively impact your credit score. Now, what can you do? All that being aside with Wells Fargo and closing any kind of account. I even just mentioned, that's an installment loan for me when I say I'm going to pay off my car soon, right? That's an installment loan for me. So closing that account negatively impacts your credit score. So what are the options you can do if you find yourself in this situation? What can you do? Well, you can refinance it by doing a personal loan somewhere. So you can do a personal loan. If you were with Wells Fargo, I would suggest you do a personal loan with Wells Fargo. But maybe they'll even give you a break because they see how this is going to impact their customers. But you can get a personal loan to pay that off. So it'll be switching it basically. So you have this personal line of credit. You'll close it by creating a personal loan. And then you'll have that monthly payment. It'll convert basically to an installment loan, and you'll have that monthly payment over whatever the term is, whether it's 36 months, 60 months, 120 months, whatever it is. So you can do that, right? You can refinance this particular option, or you can do it with another banking entity. You can go ahead and refinance it. It may lower your interest rate as well, which is positive for your pocket, right? So you can do that refinance, right? Okay, that's one. Maybe you can pay it off. So maybe you can pay it off. Just, you got cash. You can go ahead and pay it off so it doesn't impact you so much, right? Maybe you can just go ahead and pay it off. Maybe you can do, quote unquote, pay it off by utilizing a offer from one of your other credit cards. Maybe you can do that. So, you got the offers out there. You got 0 interest for the next 18 months or whatever it is. Then maybe you can pay it off by utilizing that. Now, Of course, that's going to drive up your credit utilization on that particular card. You're still going to have that same amount of debt that's available, and you're going to have less of a limit available to help you with your credit